Welcome to Share, a podcast production of Amethyst Recovery Centers. I'm your host, Kabir Singh. We want to remind our listeners that addiction is treatable and recovery is possible. If you or a loved one needs help with addiction or mental health disorders, please call us today at 855-80-SOBER or visit us at amethystrecoverycenters.com. Addiction's often called a family disease. It's not only because our addictions impact our entire families, but because research shows that addiction can be both genetic and learned behavior. Today, we're very lucky to have the wonderful Des Nevadomski on the program to discuss growing up in a household with addiction and going through hardships in our own recovery. I affectionately call you Des, so from here on out, I'm not going to call you Des, right?
Please.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us here at our Owings Mills Recording Center.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Kabir. Thank you
course.
so much. It means a lot to me that I was thought of.
Yes, of course. So you grew up. I've had the benefit of hearing your story, and kind of have a greater understanding of this, and I'm sort of going to touch upon some of that. You grew up in a house where substance abuse was fairly common. Tell us a little bit about how that was growing up, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Sure. Well, my earliest memory is my father beating my mother so badly because he was in a drunken rage. My father was the kind of dad that wasn't really there very consistently, so we'd wait for him. He was supposed to get us on the weekend. When I say us, I have a brother and sister. So if he showed up, but I'll never forget the police taking my father away in handcuffs. I even remember the t-shirt he was wearing. Wow. So that's the environment I grew up in. My mom functioned as an alcoholic, but only drank at nighttime, right? So she was able to go to work during the day and maintain a household, but at nighttime she had to drink. And then when I saw my father on the weekends, he was using. I'll never forget watching my father crush up a whole Oxycontin 80 and snorting it right in front of us. And we'd watch him and, "Why are you doing that, Dad? Why?" And he would say, "The doctor says I have to do it this way." And so at age 14, when I found my first Oxy 80, I crushed the thing up and I snorted it and I overdosed for the first time.
Wow.
So those were the kind of things that I witnessed growing up with my mom and my dad. It was nothing but insanity. So that was my childhood.
So in every sense of the word, then, a family disease, both your mother and father were actively in addiction. Now, while that looked different, it's fairly common actually for people to drink alcohol, use drugs after a day. It sounds like your mom was perhaps more in that sort of silo, and your dad perhaps was more full blown, just kind of unable to manage life and snorting OxyContin, as we know, is not it's not prescribed by the doctor to be done that. It's like one every 4 hours, maybe something like that. So that's tough, and that's it's tough for me to hear. And as a person in recovery, we know we hear about these stories all the time. And while I sit here and listen to that, it does sound kind of normal to me, because I mean, how many of these stories have we heard at this point? And but that does lead me in sort of the next question is, what doesn't always happen the same for folks is, how did that affect your upbringing, sort of the substance abuse that you both saw and started taking part in?
Well, I became a rebellious teenager living with Mom. She had structure and rules, and I had the good time dad on the weekends. So by the time I was 15, I moved out to be with my father. My father and I were running partners. I mean, his disease gotten so bad that he made a decision to sell my body to get drugs. And I wanted to please my dad so badly, and I was using, so I did what he asked.
And you're like, how old are you at this point?
At this time, I am 15.
Okay.
15, maybe 16 years old. It's all a little cloudy, but I was
still
very young.
Very young.
Very young. I was a little girl. Stopped going to school. So I started using with my father, and what that brought is we were running from the police. We moved to Las Vegas. It was just chaos, constant chaos. So by the time I was 17, I had a full-blown drug addiction, and I was by my father's side, and he used my addiction. When I was dope sick, he used it to his benefit. Well, if you do this, I'll give you this one. And my life was just wrapped around this substance that was so small. I had no life skills. All I knew was how can I please my dad to get that thing that he's holding over me.
Wow.
So that was how I grew up with him.
Yeah, so if you're out there listening, you got a fairly good picture of how Des's life was before recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, Des, you know this, and is while we like to, shed light on how it was, we like to talk about, what happened and what it's like now. So
yes, please.
Yeah, so we'll jump into that. Is what led you into recovery to maybe enter the journey?
Okay, well, the first time I heard a message of recovery. I slept outside of a state-run detox for 2 days till a bed opened up. I was 22 at the time, and I was sleeping outside. I had hit the bottom of the bottom. I had nothing left. I had nothing. And I went in there. I was 90 pounds. My face was sunken in. It was all scabbed because I picked when I used. And they brought a message in, and I heard this message of hope. And what really resonated with me was this woman, after the meeting, she hugged me. She didn't care what I looked like. She didn't care where I came from. It was this intimacy that I was missing for so long. I had been on the street for 3 years up until that point, and I felt compassion for the first time. And she said, you never have to use again. And at that time, I didn't really want to stop getting high. That's the insanity of it, right? I had every excuse to use. I'm supposed to use my dad's and every excuse. I have all this pain, all these terrible things. I was such a victim. And then I heard that victims don't recover. So I had to let go of that victim role and do something different. And I heard that message, and I didn't stay clean since then, but I was introduced to a better way of life. And then at age 24, I finally got clean, and I've been clean ever since. So that's been my journey. It's been a rocky road to get to the point of losing the desire to use, but I really had to put in some work and change everything in my recovery to be the woman I am today.
Yeah, I've often heard that in recovery, that the only thing that needs to change is everything, right? And so no big surprise that you said that, because that was the same held true for me. And while my story may look different, in a lot of ways it looks similar, because everything had to change, sort of people, places, and things. It's so that sort of leads me into my next question is, people in recovery often talk about how things don't suddenly become, rainbows and unicorns, as often as they get clean, get sober, whatever their chosen language is. And life happens, and sometimes it's very hard. You've experienced your fair share of that. Of course, we know about the pre-recovery.
Right.
You've shared that with us. But, in your clean time, in the sobriety, in recovery right now, tell us a little bit about that. It's not always, again, rainbows and unicorns.
Right. Well, when I came in, I had a rough road in the beginning there. I was still engaging in these behaviors that weren't very healthy for me. So cliche recovery stuff. I got into a relationship, moved in with the guy, and by 90 days clean, I was homeless in recovery. And I'll never forget that feeling of making that choice. All it takes is one decision that determines our lives, right? And I made that decision to move in, and then I was homeless, and I slept in my car, I think a couple weeks, and I had this car parked outside of this meeting, and I went to the meeting, and I shared a burning desire, and I said, listen, I don't want to get high, but I am starving, I have nowhere to go, I have no gas, I'm sleeping in my car. And the love that I received in the fellowship that I choose to go to was just out of this world, they fed me, they put me on a couch, and I was able to slowly build my life back up. But I did not get high over that feeling of hopelessness. I didn't understand. I'm 90 days clean. Why am I living like this? I had these expectations that my life should be gleaming, or I was comparing myself to others who had families that were providing for them, and they had cars, and why is this happening to me? Again, the victim mentality. I had to let that go, and I started building this life for myself. At a year clean, I had a sponsor die. This woman, the same woman that brought that meeting in, that H&I meeting, that gave me that hug, she became my sponsor. Then she died because at 12 years clean, she made a decision to just drink. And she drove herself into a lake and drowned. And we had search parties, and I had a year clean, and I couldn't understand, why is this happening, right? And I stayed clean. I got a new sponsor. I dived into the program. Fast forward, there's just been a whole slew of obstacles and turmoil and feelings and all types of things come up. But if I don't get high, it gets better. Yeah. I have learned on this journey that everything is temporary. Every good feeling, every bad feeling, it's temporary. I don't have to make impulsive decisions to escape my feelings today. I can get through anything clean. I got married. I'm getting divorced next week, right? And I've gone through this. I moved from Florida to Maryland, was a newcomer at 5 years clean and meetings all over again. I had to build a network all over. I had every excuse to hibernate. I moved here during winter. I don't know what I was thinking from sunny South Florida, right? Heart of winter. I'm here. I had every excuse, but I don't want to live the life. See, I heard something so amazing. I know what my life looks like if I go and get high. It's jails, it's psych wards, it's death if I'm lucky, right? Mm-hmm. Because my biggest fear isn't using and dying. My fear is living and existing with the disease of addiction active. Yeah. I know what my life looks like if I use. What I don't know is what it looks like if I just stay clean and what the future holds. The biggest gift that I've gotten in my recovery is to look in the mirror and like myself. Yeah. When I came here, I was so broken. I hated who I was as a person. I was such this lost little girl. And today, just today, because every day is a little different, but today, I looked in the mirror. I didn't have to put makeup on to feel okay. And I got dressed and I did my best. And I felt beautiful. I felt like a beautiful woman, Yeah. And that's because of recovery. So the hardships make me who I am. I'm at the point now, it's like, bring it on. What do you got for me? I will get through it clean.
And that's the important message here. And for me, it's to hear that and hear that repeatedly. It makes so much sense today. After giving myself a chance, the same chance it sounds like you gave yourself. Sticking around for a little bit, listening to others, and that makes so much sense because I know what my life looks like if I choose to go make a bad decision, because really that's all it is today. Mm-hmm. When you perhaps get to the point where you or I are at, or both of us are at, where you sort of get the proverbial monkey off your back, it becomes just a bad decision at that point. I'm going to go and jackpot myself and go hit the reset button if I'm lucky. Right. You know what I mean? A guy like me, I'll run into a tree and I'll be in a wheelchair. I mean, I can really, really relate heavily to what you're saying. The gifts are you can't even predict what's going to happen in this process, and you shared that so eloquently here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really, it touched me.
I feel it in my heart.
Yeah, no,
I do.
And I've always appreciated that about you, the listeners that are here listening to this podcast. Desiree shares in her particular 12-step fellowship, and if you're ever the recipient of that message, it is incredible. I'd be on the edge of your seat. I've heard her speak at conventions and local meetings and stuff. It's just remarkable. So having grown up in a household with active addiction going on, you're clean now. Mm-hmm. You have your own family. You mentioned I knew that was happening. Well, in a week from now. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But you have a son. Mm-hmm. Out of that came a son. How does it feel knowing that you don't have to raise your son in active addiction? I know as folks in recovery, we see some of those people that haven't been able to latch on in the process. Right. They lose their kids. Yeah. It's ugly.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But you're on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So to be able to be a mother, tell us a little bit more about maybe, how he doesn't have to grow up seeing what you saw.
My son never has to see me high, and that's such a gift. That's the gift that I've gotten in the process. I can raise him. The way I live my life is based on these principles that I didn't know until I got here. With honesty, integrity, self-respect, dignity, like all those things that I'm taught in the process of recovery, I can teach those to my son. The level of patience that I have, he's 3.5 and he's almost 4. I mean, he's exhausting some days, I have these, so we're doing this joint custody deal, and I have him, when I have him, by myself, and He's exhausting, but I've learned that I can take a step back, take a deep breath in, and I don't have to be so reactive. I allow him his process. I can communicate with him. I'm so grateful that I can be present for him. Yeah. I show up. I never not show up. I never not pay what I have to pay. Same with his father. I mean, granted, we're going through this divorce, but he's also in recovery, and he is a phenomenal father. And that is one of the gifts. Like, we have these traditions and steps in our lives that have taught us how to have this relationship where the primary focus is our son. Mm-hmm. So we come together regardless of the whatever else is there, resentment, whatever. We know how to put it to the side because our son comes first. We don't fight. He doesn't have to see that insanity that I grew up with. He doesn't have to see us fighting and screaming and using and none of it. He sees kindness and love, and I'm only able to give that to him because of recovery and to be a decent, I do the best I can with what I have, and I'm the kind of person, teach me, I'm willing to learn. I do not have it all figured out, but I have women in my life that are also mothers in recovery that teach me, that help me. I have a support group. When I need help at a meeting and I have to bring them along because I don't not go to meetings because of a son as an excuse, right? I show up, and there are 9 out of 10 times there's a woman there that you get your message in. I'll help, and I have that. When they say the village to help raise a child, I have my village, and I only have that in recovery. So
it's interesting that what you brought up, and it's really important for me. You spoke about the women in recovery, and it is a general sort of theme in recovery that the women stick with the women and the men stick with the men, and I'm hearing that message from you. And role models, when it comes to role models, who are your role models in recovery? What does that look like for you? Or the sponsor that you're talking about in this case, that you have a relationship, and are there role models? How does that look?
Well, funny story. So I hosted a positivity party a couple months ago, and I invited 6 women to my home. And we had all these activities, resentment fire, where we threw resentments into the fire and we released them, and games. And there were 6 of us women. We didn't talk about a single other person. There was no gossip. There was no bashing. We spent that time together building each other up, listening with our hearts. Like, we were just firing each other up with love, and that's like the best way that I could describe it, is this spiritual connection that I have. I choose the women that have what I want. Right. Like my sponsor, she has what I want. She's still in Florida. I'm willing to make it work because she has what I want. And the reason why is because she constantly grows in her journey. So as long as she's growing, I can grow with her. She's definitely the woman that I desire to be. And the friends that I keep in my life, they're women that I desire to be. I don't want to be the person that talks about other people to get out of myself. I'm not that person. When I leave those conversations, I don't feel good about myself. Yeah. I fall short, sure, but I don't feel good. Women that have like this thing about them where they love other women. I love that. I choose my friends as those people. Like, if they're talking about other people, chances are they're going to talk about me too. That's true. Yeah. So that's how I choose my friends.
I've found that to be the same, and as this process has unfolded for me, usually more often than not, I've gained some sort of moral compass. I know I don't feel good leaving a conversation if it went a certain direction. Right. There's some sort of griminess that what I mean. I think I just felt grime. That. Yeah, when through with you, I know at this point because so much of that the victim role, as you talked about with us, it needs to go. But it happens through work, and it's not always solved inside of the rooms of 12-step fellowship. Sometimes that requires outside help, right? Because those are some pretty heavy baggage that we carry along. So it's important to know that there's different pathways to the healing for that. And the role models are really important for me as well. I'm about to go on a trip myself, and you know, a guy that's 45 years old, right, with two guys, one's 63 and the other's 71. Like, these are my boys, right? Like, I'm going to hang, like, you know, and so I'm going to be doing that next week, and it's just amazing the friendships that we get to have in recovery, and they are beyond anything that I could have ever expected.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it, folks. Our very own Des Nevadomski. She's our senior compliance officer, actually, here. So we better watch out. I better watch my P's and Q's. Hopefully she's shed a little light on the fact that although recovery can be dark at times, perseverance through hardships is possible. If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction or mental health disorders, call Amethyst today at 1-855-80-SOBER. That's 1-855-80-SOBER, or visit us at amethystrecoverycenters.com. I'm Kabir Singh. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.